Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracy Thomas, and I'm with Rev Talks, and today we're here to talk to several different key individuals, kind of a series following up from last week, about 2 weeks ago, I apologize, with Larry and Olga Keith from Dynamic Defense Training. And the topic today is kind of coping and managing fear, both on emotional levels and physical levels, and how they're kind of helping out with that as far as the workplace violence. Larry and Olga, would you mind introducing the guests today and kind of talk a little bit about what you guys are doing too for communities and specifically with some of the medical facilities?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for having us again today. Good to see you again. So we have very special guests today with us. We have Mr. Brad Steele, who is a psychologist at a local hospital. And we also have Eli Baker, who's actually a long-time student of ours, but he's a psychiatric nurse at that same VA hospital. And I don't want to leave anything out, so I'm going to have them tell a little bit about themselves. Go ahead, Brad.
Perfect. Dr. Steele.
All right. Yes, I'm a clinical psychologist, like Olga said. Been working here at the VA for 4 years, both in the acute psychiatric unit and in our residential treatment center, working with folks that have substance abuse issues as well as PTSD. And kind of the more appropriate tie-in, it seems like to me, is my role that I play on our Disruptive Behavior Committee and our Employee Threat Assessment team. So the VA has a really strong commitment to preventing workplace violence. We have a national office called the Workplace Violence Prevention Program, a great team, and across the country, we basically respond to reports of veteran disruptive behavior as well as employee disruptive behavior. And we come up with strategies to prevent and mitigate the risk of disruptive behavior, as well as identifying those individuals who kind of have repetitive behaviors so that we can kind of put in place a safety plan around their visits here to try to prevent them from kind of going off the rails or getting out of control. And one of the really important parts of the trainings that all employees are offered here at the VA is PMDB, and that is Eli's baby. So I'm going to turn it over to him to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Steele. So yeah, as you were saying, prevention and management of disruptive behavior, the acronym PMDB. I'm the facility's point of contact coordinator, which means I'm responsible for everybody's training requirements, in addition to being a master trainer. So I've been with the Roseburg VA for 13 years. Started out in inpatient acute psychiatry, but got a chance to work a lot of different areas in mental health. And I was able to be nominated to become a trainer for PMDB in 2008. In 2011 was nominated to be a master trainer. And so what that does is it enables me to go and teach other people how to teach the program. In addition, we as master trainers go to a recalibration conference every 2 years so that we're always ensuring that we're teaching the exact same PMDB, regardless if you get it here, you get it in Florida, you get it in New York, it's the same program. So we do that to avoid drift and make sure that all of the instructors are up to snuff and on the same page as far as what we're teaching. It's a program that's been in existence for well over 30 years. Like I said, lots of empirical data that shows that it's an effective way to mitigate and manage workplace violence, both with your internal and external customers. So probably the most predominant thing I can say is it's about early intervention by early recognition. So you identify risk factors, you identify stress factors, and then you figure out a way to appropriately intervene for each different level of stress.
Yeah, perfect. I appreciate that from both you individuals. Larry or Olga, I'm not sure which one wants to address it, but I know you guys are working with some different medical facilities and kind of doing the hands-on training and basically the non-violent side of it there. Would you mind talking just a little bit about that? And then we're going to kind of come back to both Dr. Steele and Dr. Baker.
Just Nurse Baker.
Sure. We can call you Doctor. So yes, we've been working with medical facilities for a few years, and one of our newest accounts is a local hospital. We've been there. We just celebrated our year anniversary with them. It's been a very successful program. What they were looking for is more of a hands-on approach rather than theoretical talks. So what we do is we come in and we have hands-on approach with them. We show them some very simple leverage and structure-based techniques that are applicable in their specific situation where you're dealing with violence in a non-violent manner. So that's really the focus of our training. How do you protect yourself against somebody who is, upset, under stress, but also protect them at the same time, because, we're in a hospital setting, there can be an upset patient, there can be an upset family member. So we want to, it's a little bit different than street defense.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is assessing the level of the threat. And that's something that has to be done very quickly. So we work on mental strategies for that, and separating, what would happen in the parking lot safety situation versus in-house situation with the patient. So those two things will be handled completely different.
Oh, perfect, perfect. So I'm going to mute in between. We have a little feedback, so you may have to unmute. But Dr. Steele, would you mind talking a little bit about, from your experience, something to talk to viewers right now? What can we do to talk to them and help them understand some of the first signs that we can see prior to the pre-incident, before something occurs? What are some signs that they can watch out for, while they're in the workplace environment?
Well, one of the things that I would encourage people to do is just kind of pay attention to themselves, their bodies. Do a little bit of self-reflection. Sometimes we carry around stress and we're not aware of it. And sometimes our body has subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways of telling us that we're carrying this stuff. So sometimes people will grit their teeth. Okay, you might wake up in the morning and your jaw is sore, or you might be getting headaches, or you might notice muscle tension in your upper back and neck. And, these are all ways that your body starts to displace stress. If you notice that you're irritable and cranky and you kind of snap at people, and that's not typically who you might regularly be, these are signs, subtle signs that are telling you, hey, something's going on. And when you allow yourself to engage in a process of self-reflection, you start to think, okay, what is really going on here? And you step back and you take a look at yourself, or you ask for feedback from your coworkers or your family. Ask them to be honest with you. They can give you some feedback about what they notice is going on. There may be behaviors that you're engaging in that would be atypical or unusual for you. So when you start to get feedback like that, it's important to pay attention, whether it's your body telling you something or your loved ones or your coworkers telling you something. It's important to pay attention to it. And there's a converse side to that. I want to kind of pitch this a little bit. When we pay attention in the moment, and we're intentional about paying attention to what's happening right here and right now, it's a process we can call mindfulness. If we engage in mindful activities, whether it's paying attention to your emotions, your thinking, what you're experiencing, whether it's through your senses, all of that stuff gives you important feedback. And by trying to be in the present moment, you can, in some ways, divert your attention from things you might be fearful of or anticipating being problems for you down the road, or focusing on past mistakes, failures, disappointments, that kind of stuff. By staying in the present, we kind of allow ourselves a little bit more freedom emotionally from those two sides that might pull us off track.
Very good. I appreciate that. Eli, if you don't mind, a question for you is, I'd like to ask, in your experience, and then from what you've been doing for so many years, I think you said almost nearly 30 years there, what are some ways that people can, manage this with themselves? He was talking about the mindfulness and kind of that self-awareness, if you will, but what are some ways when it starts impacting you, what are some steps that you can take for yourself as an individual and to kind of take a step back and make yourself calm down a little bit, if you will?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, although I will tell you in the history of the phrase calm down, it usually doesn't have the results that you want. So I like slow down. And that's just, again, kind of reflecting on what Dr. Steele was saying, being mindful of your own anxiety. As your stress levels go up, your perceptual field starts to narrow. So you start focusing in on elevated heart rate, you feel more stress, you're anxious, you're not processing information very well, your heart rate goes up even more, you start feeling panicky. And so there's that spectrum that you go to. And any place in that spectrum, whether you're dealing with somebody else who's agitated or you're dealing with yourself that's agitated, you have that ability to pause, slow down. And it sounds cliche, but breathing is really critically important. Taking that moment to sometimes it's important to take a physical step back, like actually take steps away from the situation that gives you that safety, that zone of safety, and that also that ability to feel that you have more control over your environment. You're breathing, you're taking care of yourself, which is also, in my estimation, probably the number one factor in being successful in de-escalating somebody else is being able to reflect calm behavior. So you want them to mirror your behavior. The opposite is true if somebody starts yelling and you talk over them or try to let your point across by being louder, it just ends up in a screaming match. Whereas if you slow your cadence of your voice down, you have control over that. If you slow your responses down, lower your timbre of your voice a little bit, reflect calm, typically other people will start to mirror that behavior.
Perfect. And that kind of goes into our next question a little bit with that de-escalation. What are some, I don't want to use the word coping mechanisms for a better lack of words. I'm not really sure how to word that. You guys are their expertise in this area, but when you guys are seeing, what can you say to the public here or to the community, for those individuals that witness somebody's going through this and they can see it, even those individuals might not be seeing it while they're going through it at that time. What are the do's and don'ts, if you will, or what are the right things to say and the wrong things to say?
That's a great question. I would say probably the most important thing is that if you have the confidence to put yourself out there and check in with somebody, you see somebody struggling, ask them a question. Hey, how are you doing? And be prepared. If they say I'm falling apart and it's the end of the world, you may be there for a while. So you have to be willing to commit that time to them. That being said, if we were all a little bit more compassionate and shared a little more of our own time with others, giving them validation and making them feel heard, a lot of times the issues that arise that escalate to where potential violence is there could be almost entirely avoided if people would just take the time to really actively listen to what others are saying. What is it that they're trying to express? And helping them to figure out in your capacity, what can you do to help them? It may not be your role or your responsibility in certain aspects of helping somebody, like medical care, seeking medical care, for example. But in that same instance, you're going to take them and hand them off to somebody whose job that is, showing that caring and compassion. As far as the don'ts, probably the biggest one is don't approach somebody until you know what their stress level is. And of course, they don't wear a meter that says I'm at a severe level of stress, but recognizing that the closer you are, if somebody can touch you, they can harm you. So you can have a conversation with somebody from a distance away and still engage and give that person your full focus and not put yourself in harm's way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it sounds easier than it probably is in real life. And, we appreciate those thoughts there. Dr. Still, would you have anything that you'd like to add to that for those witnessing someone going through this?
Sure. I really want to applaud Eli for putting it out there the way he did. First, take care of your safety, and ensuring the physical distance is one way of doing that. Another way is, let's just call it a process of joining. You want to try to join the person in a conversation. And you don't necessarily want to match their tone or their posture, but you want to join them in a way that you come across as non-threatening, that you're safe, that you are genuinely concerned and interested in what they have to say. So there's this thing called empathy. You know, if you can kind of try to put yourself into their shoes, and you can convey that through your words and your posture and your attitude, you'll be able to join with that person. And then when you say, just do something simple, simple communication strategies like asking open-ended questions. Those are questions that you can't answer with a yes or a no. Get that person to tell the story that they have. There's obviously something going on. And when you come and you start communicating with them with genuine interest, they feel like they can open up to you and potentially trust you. And if they trust you, they're a lot less likely to do something to try to hurt you or somebody else. So doing that process of joining, having empathic connection, reflecting back to them what you heard them say. If they've said a lot, every once in a while, summarizing what you've heard them say can be really helpful. Yeah, those are some of the basics. And when you're able to manage your own stress level, your own fear in the face of somebody that maybe potentially is, hostile or especially aggressive, if you can help them to calm down by showing them calmness, you've won most of the battle right there.
Thank you both. That's really interesting topics there, and I think it can really help a lot of individuals out there, just kind of understanding what people go through, and we appreciate that. Larry and Olga, is from your standpoint, when it comes time to where somebody's got, I want to use the word, somebody starts to put the hands on, if you will, and sometimes in a violent manner, maybe not necessarily they're intending it to be violent, but they're just in an aggressive state. What kind of type of training do you offer that's nonviolent that can help those that are instructors, those that want to become instructors, those who want to help other people out, and those individuals that are just in the workplace? What recommendations do you have for them?
Well, again, it depends on the particular situation and environment. We're talking about the medical profession most of the time. We're talking about keeping things as non-violent as possible while controlling the situation physically with, a violent patient, family member, something like that. And we make use of leverage and structure to overcome size and strength. And because, pain threshold is different for everybody, so we don't necessarily want to use pain as a way of controlling somebody. We would rather use leverage and structure to do that, and do it in an efficient manner as possible with minimal damage to either party. We want to protect yourself, but we also want to protect the patient in that case. And that's where it differs from like a parking lot safety or something like that. If it's a street self-defense, then yeah, you probably are going to inflict damage in order to create space between you and the bad guy. In the hospital situation, the bad guy is actually not really so much of a bad guy. They're a patient that needs to be controlled or contained until help can arrive, or until they can calm the situation down one way or another. So, but minimal damage is the whole thing that we're looking for in that situation.
Very good, Larry. Yeah, I like that. And it's a different type of concept, because you see a lot in the industry where a lot of the training that you see, that's going into some of these companies. It's more like what you mentioned with the street fighting. It's more of combatives, Krav Maga type style, where I can see where with patients, obviously that's not going to work. But Olga, a question for you, I guess, would be, is when you're doing this training with the individuals, is this something that just anybody can do? I mean, or is this something that they have to, they've had to have martial arts training before, they've had to have combatives training, or some kind of defensive tactics? Or is it pretty much that you feel like most nurses, doctors, medical staff, most of the staff there can learn what you guys have to teach there for workplace violence?
Sure. Well, martial arts training, just the idea of it can be very intimidating to people. And in our organization, we have made it a point for ourselves to be approachable and to break it down to where anybody can do this, right? So when we go into a hospital setting and they're trying to cycle every employee through us, every staff member, you know, most of these people have, you know, never done any kind of thing. Most of these people don't get in each other's spaces like we do. So it's already uncomfortable on that level, you know, let alone trying to teach the martial arts. So the techniques that we teach are very, very simple. There's something that after practicing just a few times, you will be able to apply. Of course, you know, you do have to take into consideration, you know, the stress level and things like this. So that's why we always stress the importance of continuous practice. So they don't necessarily have to join a martial arts class, but we encourage them to practice at home. We encourage them to practice even with themselves. You know, it's an ongoing joke with every class that we have. So, you know, we're always talking about how years from now, when we go into the ER department, you know, if you see a couple of nurses, you know, trying to strangle each other and get out or something like this, you know, they're just practicing what we've taught them. So, and because the idea is to really cycle every employee through what we do and do it on an ongoing basis. So what they're looking to do now is have us there, you know, and maybe at least once a year, everybody goes through what we're teaching. But yes, it's very approachable. It's like Larry was saying, it's based on leverage and structure. So your size doesn't matter, right? Your abilities, your strength doesn't matter. We're really teaching how you can do this, you know, without extensive training, without being strong.
Right, and it has to be practical, and it has to be easy to remember, because they're not getting in the number of repetitions that we would in a regular martial arts class, right? Mm-hmm. They're getting that experience with us in that particular you know, seminar setting, and so it needs to be something that they can remember easily. And the way I put it is like, if you were to, you know, if they were to leave the room and somebody were to attack them outside that room, they should be able to apply what we've just shown them.
And it's really neat to see how excited everybody gets. Mm-hmm. You know, we tend to take these things for granted, you know, just a regular wrist grab escape. You know, it's so simple, but when people feel how well it works, and when, you know, they just can't hold on to it anymore. You know, the elation, the joy that we get in our classes from those techniques working. I think there's a lot of benefit to it too, because people walk away with a boosted confidence that, okay, you know, I have some tools to do something.
Yeah, the self-doubt goes away, and their confidence in their ability to actually apply hands-on, you know, and defend themselves is there in place now.
In fact, the hospital has been really good with giving every class a review sheet to where they write down everything they liked or didn't like about the class. We have yet to see any negative, actually, so it's all been great. And over and over, we see somebody mention how their confidence level actually went up even after one class.
Very good, very good. And that kind of leads into the next question, really, is about confidence and how much, and Dr. Steele or Eli, if one of you want to talk about this, how much does confidence play a role during something like this? You know, if somebody was attacked, you know, in workplace violence, how much does that confidence play a role, knowing that they have I don't want to say a system or a means of defending themselves, and also possibly a pre-planned route, maybe, you know, where do they go if should this occur? Could you guys talk a little bit about that? Would you guys be able to talk a little bit on topics about, you know, how much that confidence plays a role?
Yeah, sure. Think about yourself when you do anything. The more you practice something, the more what you get, or confident you get. So if, like Olga was just saying, if you've practiced the strategies that you're taught year after year, and you do refreshers, your confidence continues to grow. Yeah, it's not something most people just doing a time or two, you know, might have the highest confidence level, but you give it time, you give it some practice, you maintain your diligence and kind of keeping your skills up. You know, anything like that. You know, I practice throwing the football with my boys, and guess what? You know, we do it every day for 3-4 days a week. Their confidence grows. They want to do more. They want to show off a little bit. You know, that's what we're like as human beings. You know, we like to feel a sense of accomplishment when we've mastered something. So yeah, so you know, progressing from being a novice to a master, hey, your confidence grows, and that's the way things work. I got my start working with difficult people, working in a prison system, and my confidence level when I first started working there, holy cow, it was scary, you know. But over time, I learned how to carry myself and how to interact with the inmates, and not to be, you know, unrealistic in my assumptions, one way or the other. You know, my confidence grew. So at this point, you know, I feel fairly confident when I enter into a situation where somebody may be very upset. Um, it, you know, it's not something that most people are going to want to jump into, you know, uh, like the graduate course right away. But if you have to, have some training, you know, you'll have at least your novice level of confidence to fall back on and know what.
Very good. We appreciate that, Dr. Steele. Eli, would you be able to touch a little bit on that topic too? Because what we see a lot of times out in the communities and is, you know, you hear people talk about, you know, they feel so uncomfortable being around situations like that because they're insecure or they don't know what to do. They don't have a route. You know, you hear more and more of these businesses now having to come up with route planning for, you know, the human resources are coming up with how to get their people trained. You know, basically it's all about building a little bit of self-esteem and a little bit of self-confidence in a way to speak and knowing how to manage that. But maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And just kind of want to just go back. Our program that we teach for the federal government, it really isn't self-defense. They're personal safety skills, and they are designed to extricate a person from an assaultive type behavior rather than instinctively striking back. And so it's always with the intention of early action. So when you see the signs of stress happening and you realize that your verbal de-escalation skills aren't sufficient to ensure your safety, you start thinking about managing your personal distance from somebody. So we always are assessing three things: the environment, ourselves, and others. And we have the most control over ourselves, the least control over others. And so looking at your environment and knowing where your exits are, your panic alarms, your duress alarms, your immediate resources, the people that are going to come to your aid in the event that something happens, is critically important, especially in the healthcare industry, because you have two different types of violence. You have predatory violence where somebody has an intent, they want something from you, and then you have effective violence. Most healthcare workers are actually more likely to experience effective violence where they startled somebody and they spun around and got smacked. You know, the person didn't necessarily intend to mean harm, but it's still considered workplace violence. Going back to the confidence and what you're talking about as far as how can people develop that confidence, practice, and not just practicing the techniques and the moves, but rehearsing what you will say to somebody when you notice they're starting to escalate. How are you going to intervene, and what are you going to do to keep yourself calm? Practicing and rehearsing those scenarios in your head or with a partner in a safe environment, psychologically safe learning environment, is going to give you the confidence you need to be more efficient at de-escalation.
Very good. I appreciate that, Eli. Yeah, that's great information from both of you. Olga and Larry, I'd like to ask another question. You know, when you're talking about doing the training with the medical and kind of what Eli was talking about a little bit, he was talking about how you recognizing and creating that distance. Is that something you guys work with, whether it's, you know, whether it's situational awareness that is done pre-event, or maybe it's, you know, after you have to, you know, use some type of physical force of some sort in a non-violent manner? Do you guys teach any kind of concept to where you're teaching a distancing or, you know, creating that gap, if you will?
Yeah, we teach about what we call pre-incident indicators, you know, so how to watch for things, telltale signs that some violence may possibly happen. Also, you know, going back to a little bit what Eli was talking about, rehearsing what you would say in those situations. We teach a method called control and negotiate. So when in a patient environment, you know, we do have to actually contain a patient or family member, you know, whatever the situation may be in that hospital environment. We're also using our words, you know, and you know, trying to calm things down. So we teach those methods as well. But the pre-incident indicators, and then also being aware of your environment and the weapons of opportunity for both you and whoever could be potentially violent. All those things are super important. Anything to add to that?
Great,
Well,
good.
I wanted to add, I don't know if it's on the same topic or not, but something that as Dr. Steele and Eli were talking, one of their co-workers, who is one of our students, she is a nurse, and from what I understand, she works with dementia patients. And, you know, I never get tired of hearing her stories. When she first started with us, actually we did a self-defense workshop for the VA, and she came as, you know, as one of the students for the workshop. Then she stayed for a longer term. Well, you know, sometimes on the job with her dementia patient, she does find herself in situations where the patient is upset, and you know, these are combat trained patients, so you know, and sometimes they're not we're mentally there. So she's been under attack before, and she said before she would panic, she would freeze, and that's a concept that we always discuss in every teaching that we do, in every class that we do, is that, you know, people always talk about fight or flight, but you know, we forget to mention freeze, which is the, you know,
that's the danger point.
The danger point, because if you run away or if you fight for your life, then that's a good thing. But if you freeze up, you know, that's where the bad things happen. So that's, you know, that was her situation. She would freeze up, she would panic. But now, not only she is able to apply some of the techniques that she's learned here, she also has a plan. So while she is trying to contain the patient, she has plan A, plan B, plan C, and she can be mindful enough to know, okay, and I can't hurt the patient. So it's, she said her heart rate, you know, doesn't go up, her anxiety is down. It's like, you know, she feels more in control of the situation. And I just,
yeah, she's not locked up by fear, and she's able to make a you know, on the spot threat assessment and figure out what level of threat this is and how to contain it with minimal damage to herself or the patient.
Very good, very good. Last question I really have is going to be, I think, for Dr. Steele and Eli. And Dr. Steele, if you want to, you know, answer the question first, if you don't mind. But you know, when we go into the businesses currently right now, you know, I own a few different companies, and we do, you know, everything from active shooter to, you know, hoping to one day do some of the workplace violence with Olga and Larry Keith. But you know, what we're seeing is kind of what Olga was just speaking about right now, is we see so many people that their stress levels are very high, the anxiety is high. You know, in the community, the average workers, they're stressed out because they don't know how to mitigate this. And what would you, if you were to give like 2 or 3 recommendations, because, you know, earlier you both were talking, you and Eli both were talking about, you know, everything from, you know, understanding, creating the understanding, you know, watching the signs, kind of feeling what your body's going through. You can see if people are gritting their teeth, whatnot, all that. What are 2 or 3 things that you think are good takeaways for people, or maybe even some research that they should do on their own? 2 or 3 things that would be a good takeaway for them to understand when a situation is occurring and how to manage that.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to what I kind of started off saying. Pay attention to yourself, the signs that your body's giving you. You know, if you've got an increased heart rate, noticing that you're starting to perspire, those are typical when a person is stressed, anxious, fearful. That means your body's telling you, I potentially am in a dangerous situation. And it's getting you ready for that fight or flight kind of event. So pay attention to it. Don't ignore those. Don't ignore the signs, would be the first one. The second one is, if you're carrying, you know, stress, tension, anxiety home with you after you've left the situation, it's really important to find productive ways to try to de-stress. And there are a lot of great ways to de-stress. You know, watching TV, playing games, getting a massage, going for a run, taking a shower, savoring a meal, having a great meal, you know, a lot of different things, listening to music, doing meditation. There's so many different positive ways for us to deal with stress. Exercise, for crying out loud. What a concept. You know, we can work out some of the anxiety or the tension that we're carrying around by doing either the hard stuff, exercising, or the easy stuff, listening to music. And they each have their place in our life, you know, and depending on personal preferences, it's important to find something that works for you and do it because our lives nowadays can be pretty stressful, pretty hectic. And particularly so if we're dealing with, you know, if we're in an occupation where we have to worry about getting hit when we come to work, you know, whether you're a nurse or some kind of a healthcare provider or police officer, firefighter, you know, some occupations are inherently more dangerous than others. And when we are in one of those occupations, we really need to do ourselves a favor and have a plan for the long term, because you get burned out if you don't.
That's great information, Dr. Still. Really appreciate that. Eli, would you have anything? Let me, you're still muted there, but would you have anything to add to that?
Actually, no, I think that Dr. Still wrapped that up pretty nicely. I would say there are a couple of videos out there on YouTube that are worth watching. Bene Brown does a great video on empathy that's worth a watch to kind of understand perspective taking for somebody. Helps you understand where somebody else is distressed, and you can kind of see from your own perspective things that you've dealt with in your life that they might be going through, so you can build that bond with them. Another one is How Heavy is the Glass? It's an excellent video that kind of illustrates the, you know, stress, even the minimal stress that we overlook from day to day can build up and become debilitating. So it's important to be able to recognize your own signs and symptoms of stress and mitigate those so that you can better help others. My biggest takeaway from any kind of workplace violence prevention is always trust your gut instinct. If it doesn't feel safe, it's probably not safe, and you should be using distance to keep yourself safe. And that would be, you know, the minimal safe distance is however far away you feel comfortable.
Well, thank you. That's a great information, and I know that it's valuable because creating that distance is definitely good. And I think we appreciate both you guys, everything you guys had to add in here for the workplace violence prevention. Larry and Olga, any last words you'd like to you know, offer to the individual listeners that are going to be watching this and listening to this out there? As far as workplace violence, you know, with the dynamic defense training, anything you want to have to add in there on that?
Well, first I want to thank Dr. Steele and Eli for their input. It was super, super valuable. When Dr. Steele was first talking about, you know, personal assessment, I myself was, you know, doing a little reflection and seeing where I was. So I appreciate that. That is very valuable, and it's, you know, not hard to do. But something to add as far as workplace violence. You know, what is the saying? It's better to be a
when we were in the garden,
so it's always good to have the preparation. You know, our motto, so to speak, at dynamic defense training is prepare, prevent, protect. And, you know, preparation, you know, it doesn't hurt. And being prepared will give you that boosted confidence, the way you carry yourself, the way you converse with others, the way you look at others, you know, your eye contact, everything about you, your body language is going to change if you're confident, and you're going to be confident if you prepare. So it's always good to be proactive rather than later on saying, well, I wish I would have. So workplace violence, you know, it's, I can't stress the importance enough, and employers really, organizations should really have some kind of a plan to protect their staff as well as their clients.
right? And I would say that, you know, We sometimes say that violence is the next step for lack of intelligent resolution, right? And intelligent resolution is going to come from that preparedness. So being prepared ahead of time. I compare it to like having an insurance policy. It's something that hopefully we never have to use it, but it's there if we need it, right? And so I think that's a good way for people to kind of identify with that. It's like, okay, well, you know, if I'm prepared and something happens, I will have some kind of plan of action that I can do. If nothing ever happens, fantastic. Hopefully nothing ever happens.
Yeah, I love that, that prevent, prepare, protect, you know, it covers those areas. Kind of Dr. Steele, Eli, that both were talking about that preparation and the prevention, especially. So it was very good talking to everybody here. And Larry and Olga, if you'd like to do this again in another 30 days or something, maybe get on here and talk a little bit more about it. And we'd love to have all listeners come in and you know, be able to contact you if they want to be able to contact you. Do you have a website, or do you want them to go, do you have a phone number or anything they can contact you? They're going to be written down. They'll see it down here in the bottom of the conversation that's going on. It'll be in the the bottom feed right there. You'll see it right at the bottom. So all the contact information will be in there anyway, so they'll be able to contact. But if you have anything you want them to contact you, a preference, just let them know. Phone number, email, whatever it is. Or if not, they can just get it from down below.
Sure. Everything works, whatever is
Okay.
easiest.
Okay, so whatever works for you guys down there. Okay, well, we appreciate everybody coming on, and Dr. Steele and Eli, you guys, your experience obviously comes out right now. I mean, you can tell right now, it's just, you know, you don't have to be prepared with any questions or answers there. You guys have been doing this for so long, and I personally appreciate it as a veteran myself. I appreciate everything you guys are doing for everybody out there. You know, I know that, you know, I take a veterans group to lunch that is a PTSD that has the group. I take them to lunch, you know, once a month, and just a great group of guys. But you can see they're always telling the stories and how much they're always working on the control, that self-control, and how they have to maintain it, and the stress levels. And for what you guys do out there, I just want to say thank you very much. And we really, really appreciate everything you guys are doing for everybody out there. And Larry and Olga, I just can't even tell you how much I'm so appreciative of what you guys are trying to do. And I like that you're trying to bring it to the martial arts industry and other people, because you have a lot of things that are being taught in a harmful way out there. They're not understanding the other side of it. And I like the preparation and the prevention and preparation aspect much more than the protection aspect, kind of what Eli and Dr. Steele were talking about. And I think that's really valuable for anybody that's instructing out there. It's not just about hitting somebody or escaping with some kind of physical contact. There's so much more in depth in this, and so much more I'm looking forward to learning from you guys. So thank you very much. And we will see you guys on the next one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Dr. Steele.
Okay, and